Good evening and welcome back. Tonight we are going to talk about Ragnarok, the great ending and beginning in Norse mythology. We will look at how the old stories describe the last days of the gods, the long winter, the final battle, and the quiet new world that follows. You can simply listen and let the details drift past while you rest. As always, I would like to know where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you. If you can, please like and subscribe. This is the easiest way to support this channel, and it helps other people find these stories. Now take a deep breath, close your eyes if you want, and let us begin. The old poets called the first nothing Ginnungagap, the yawning void. It was not empty the way a room is empty. It was something stranger, a vast in-between that lay where nothing else yet existed. To one side of this gulf lay Niflheim, a world of mist and ice, with a spring called Havergelmere, where bitter waters frothed and many poison rivers ran outward into the dark. To the other side lay the blazing region of Muspel, a world of fire where sparks flew upwards and the air itself seemed to burn. At the edge of Muspel stood Surt, guardian with a flaming sword, the first hint that fire would one day walk. For a long age that has no number, cold and heat stared at one another across the void. Then the frost from Niflheim crept outward, and the sparks from Muspel flew forth, and there in the middle the two met. Ice melted, steam rose, and from the dripping and the warmth, something alive emerged. The first living being was a giant, vast and heavy, called Ymir. He lay there, newborn and ancient at once, breathing the first breaths taken in the worlds. As he slept and sweated, other beings came out of him. From the dampness under his arms grew a man and a woman of the giant race. From the rubbing of his feet together came a son. Out of one body the family of frost giants began to spread, a people older than the gods who would later curse them. At the same time, something else stirred in the thawing ice. A great cow stepped free of the frozen blocks, a creature called Audhumla. Her flanks were broad, her horns curved, and from her udders flowed 4 rivers of milk that gave Ymir the nourishment he needed. She was life in a simpler form, steady and patient. While Ymir drank from her and dreamed, she turned her attention to the ice itself. Day after day, she licked at the salty, glittering blocks, and with each stroke of her tongue something took shape within. On the first day, a hare emerged from the ice. On the second, a head. On the third, an entire man stepped forward, free and upright. His name was Buri, and he was the first of what would become the gods. Later, he fathered a son called Bor, who in turn took as his wife a giantess named Bestla. From Bor and Bestla came 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. The line between god and giant was never clean. From the beginning, the blood of their enemies ran in the veins of the gods. The world at this time was still rough and half-finished, like the inside of a craftsman's workshop after the first blows of the hammer. Ymir and his brood occupied the open spaces of Ginnungagap, growing in number. The 3 young gods watched them with wary eyes. In the stories that survived, the reasons for what came next are not fully spoken, only hinted at. Perhaps the giants threatened the new powers of the gods. Perhaps Ymir himself had become too great, too heavy for a world still thin and fragile. Or perhaps the nature of this cosmos demanded a founding violence, a first crime that would shape everything after. Whatever the reason, Odin and his brothers rose against Ymir. There is no full description of the battle. The old poems speak of slaughter, of a giant brought down by blows struck with terrible force. When Ymir fell, his blood gushed out in such quantity that it drowned almost all the giants who had grown from him. Only one of them, Bergelmir, survived, climbing with his wife onto something like a wooden box or a hollowed log and riding the flood as it rushed and foamed. It is an echo of flood myths in other cultures, men and women clinging to a vessel while the world around them drowns. From the dead body of Ymir, the gods now built a world. This is one of the most striking things about Norse myth. The universe is not made from nothing by a single word of command. It is built from a corpse. They took his flesh and turned it into land. They shaped his blood into seas and lakes and rivers. His bones became mountains, their ridges and peaks. His teeth and broken bone fragments became stones and boulders. From his skull they raised the sky, a great dome above the earth, and at the four corners they set 4 dwarfs to hold it up, creatures named Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri, whose names match the winds. To give light to this new world, the gods reached into the region of Muspel and gathered up sparks from the fire there. They fixed these sparks in the vault of the heavens as stars. They also took 2 bright lights, which some stories describe as chariots, driven across the sky. The one that shines by day they called Sol, the other Mani. In a curious twist, Sol and Mani were not only lights, but also beings in their own right. A sister and brother pressed into service. The gods set them on their paths, but even here they wove doom into the design. 2 wolves were sent to chase the lights, Skoll after the sun and Hati after the moon. So every day, across the sky, the future ran in circles, since the wolves were fated to catch their prey when the last days arrived. From Ymir's brain, the gods made clouds, grey and white and shifting, the restless mind of the slain giant lingering in the air. From his eyebrows they shaped a wall, a protective ring that would later be called Midgard, the middle enclosure, realm of men. Outside that ring, the land remained wild and dangerous, a place where giants still lived. Inside the circle, the gods began to plan a more ordered world, though the line between order and chaos would never be clean. In the places beneath and around this new earth, other realms took shape. Later, storytellers would speak of 9 worlds, connected by a single immense ash tree called Yggdrasil. They named Asgard as the high home of the Aesir gods, a place of shining halls and broad fields where the divine families gathered. They spoke of Vanaheim, the land of the Vanir gods, whose powers were tied to fertility, wealth, and the sea. They described Jotunheim, the land of giants, rocky and severe, where ancient powers brooded beyond the frontier. Niflheim remained as a cold and misty realm, with its rivers and its dread spring. Muspel burned, the distant home of fire and Surt. Alfheim belonged to the Light Elves, beings described as bright and subtle, while the Dark Elves, or dwarfs, occupied deep halls in another realm, working metal and stone. Somewhere in the roots of the world lay Hell, ruled by a queen of the same name, where many of the dead went who did not fall in battle. All these worlds were said to be bound together by Yggdrasil, the World Tree. The image of that ash tree is one of the oldest and strangest in Norse mythology. Its branches spread out over the heavens, its trunk rose in the center of existence, and its roots sank down into distant regions. One root extended toward the realm of the gods and the Well of Erd, a sacred spring where the Norns gathered. Another root reached into the lands of giants and touched the Well of Mimir, the source of deep wisdom. A third reached into Niflheim, where the dragon Nidhogg gnawed at the root above the spring Havelmir. The Norns, 3 women named Erd, Verdandi, and Skuld, tended the tree at the well that bears the name of Erd. Their own names speak of time, of what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. Each day, they scooped water from the well and white clay from the surrounding ground and sprinkled it over the bark, keeping the tree from rotting. They also carved runes and measured destinies, not only for men but for the gods themselves. Fate in this world is not an abstract idea, but a set of lines and knots laid down by figures who stand beyond even Odin. Under Yggdrasil, the creatures of the cosmos quarreled and ate and suffered. Nidhogg chewed at the lowest roots and fed on the corpses of the dead. An eagle sat in the highest branches, its name not given, and a squirrel called Ratatosk ran up and down the trunk carrying insults between the dragon and the eagle. Deer grazed on the leaves. Somewhere in the tangle of wood and root, serpents writhed. Even the tree that held everything together was not safe from decay and conflict. The worlds were connected, but the connections were full of tension. Once the place of gods and men had been prepared, the new divine rulers turned their attention to living beings who would inhabit the circle of Midgard. They found 2 pieces of driftwood on the shore, one from an ash tree, one from an elm. These were only dead logs, pale and worn by the sea. Odin and his brothers worked upon them. Odin gave them breath and life. Vili gave them understanding and movement. Ve gave them shape, speech, and the senses, along with clothing and names. The man was called Ask, the woman Embla. The gods placed them inside the protective ring, under the sky made from a skull, upon the land made from a body, in a world already bound by the plans of the Norns. Ask and Embla were not created as masters of their world. They were fragile, brief sparks against the great darkness of time. They depended on the ring of Midgard to shield them from giants, and on the favor of gods whose own future was in doubt. In this arrangement, you can see something of the harsh reality that shaped Norse belief. People in the far north lived close to hunger and cold, surrounded by seas and steep coasts. Storms destroyed ships. Ice could kill livestock and men alike. You might feel, living there, that the world outside the small circle of your farm or village was always waiting to crush you. Midgard is that circle, given mythic form. Above this fragile human dwelling place lay Asgard, the high city of the Aesir. Through the later writings of people like Snorri Sturluson, we can walk its streets in imagination. There is Valaskjalf, the hall where Odin sits on his high throne and looks out over all the worlds. there is Bilskirnir, the great hall of Thor with its many rooms, a place fit for a god of storms and strength. There is Sessrumnir, the hall of Freya, where she receives the slain women and men who come to her half of the heroic dead. Across the green field called Idavol stand other halls, each with its own stories. Yet even this city of the gods is no perfect heaven. It has walls that had to be built, defenses that had to be strengthened, and bargains that had to be struck, some of them costly. The gods who live here are not distant and flawless. Odin is the wise one, the All-Father, but he is also restless and hungry for knowledge, willing to sacrifice and to deceive. He traded one of his eyes for a drink from the well of Mimir, gaining insight into hidden things. He hung himself on Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear, for 9 nights in order to learn the runes. He sends out his ravens, thought and memory, to bring him news of the worlds, as if he fears missing any detail of the pattern that leads toward his own death. Thor, his son, walks as a force of nature among gods and men. He carries the hammer that returns to his hand after each throw, wears iron gloves, and has a belt that doubles his strength. His task is to hold back the giants who press against the borders. He is the protector of Midgard, especially its farmers and sailors, the one you pray to when storms rise. Yet the tales of Thor are often comic as well as heroic. He is tricked, mocked, deceived. Even the strongest god can be fooled. Closer to the sea and to the mysteries of wind and water stands Njord, a god who originally belonged to the Vanir. His children, Freya and Freya, bring wealth and fertility. Freya is tied to the health of the land, to harvests and peace. Freya is bound to love, desire, and magic. Yet she also takes a share of the dead warriors, a reminder that battle and beauty are not easily separated in these stories. There are other gods as well, each with a domain. Tyr, who will later lose a hand in an act of duty. Heimdall, the watchman who listens at the edge of the worlds and hears grass grow. Frigg, who knows the fate of all but seldom speaks it. All of them live beneath the shadow of fated loss. The presence of the Vanir in Asgard is itself a memory of conflict and uneasy peace. The stories say that once there was a war between the Aesir and the Vanir. It began, some say, when the gods attacked a woman who came among them, a figure called Gulveig, associated with gold and with magic. They speared her and burned her, but she returned again and again. In anger and fear, distrust caught fire. The gods fought, and neither side could win. They toppled walls, shattered spears, wrecked temples. In the end, they made a truce instead of victory. To seal that truce, they exchanged hostages. Njord, Freya, and perhaps Freya came to live among the Aesir. In return, the Aesir sent a god called Hoenir, along with the wise being Mimir, to the Vanir. When the Vanir felt cheated, believing that Hoenir without Mimir's counsel was foolish, they cut off Mimir's head and sent it back. Odin preserved the head with herbs and magic and kept it as a source of knowledge. Out of the spit that both groups had placed in a vessel as part of the treaty, the gods formed a man named Kvasir, the wisest of all humans, whose blood would later be turned into a mead of poetry. The piece itself is a fabric woven from mutilation and mistrust, from beheading and alchemy. Even harmony in this world grows from wounds. Between Asgard and Midgard stretched a strange bridge called Bifrost, often imagined as a rainbow arching across the sky. It is bright and beautiful. But the sources also say it is strong and dangerous, full of fire at certain points. It can support the host of the gods as they ride to judgment beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, but it will shatter when the armies of chaos cross it at the end. Heimdall stands guard there, watchful and sleepless, with his horn ready at his side. That horn will one day sound a note that shakes every hall, the call that Ragnarok has come. If you look at this world as a whole, the pattern that runs through it is tension. Everything is built across cracks. The gods themselves are born from giants and yet war with them. The human realm is a fragile circle surrounded by enemies. The world tree holds all things together while being gnawed, grazed, and poisoned. Time is measured by lights that constantly flee from snarling wolves. Peace between divine families depends on bargains sealed with blood and carried in memory by a severed head. The Norse did not imagine a calm universe watched over by a single, all-powerful and infallible ruler. They imagined something rougher and more precarious, a creation born from murder, maintained by courage and cunning, and threatened by forces that were present from the very beginning. When later poets spoke of Ragnarok, they were not adding doom to an otherwise safe structure. They were reading the grain of the wood, following the cracks that had been there since the first ice melted. No one quite agrees where Loki belongs. The old poems call him a companion of Odin and a guest of the gods. Yet they also whisper that his blood is older and stranger. His father is named as Farbauti, whose name hints at a cruel striker, perhaps a personification of lightning. His mother is Laufey, or sometimes Nal, a name that suggests something like a leaf or a thin stick. Out of a storm that strikes and a tree that shivers, Loki is born. Some later tales call him of the giants, yet he walks among the Aesir as if he were one of them. From the beginning he is in between, neither fully welcome nor fully an outsider. Loki is handsome by most accounts, slim and quick-eyed, with a tongue that moves even quicker than his feet. He is a shape changer. In one story, he becomes a fly to meddle with a craftsman. In another, he becomes a fish to flee capture. At times, he is a mare, at other times, an old woman, slipping through the boundaries of form and gender as easily as a man might change his cloak. In a world where most beings are bound by their nature, Loki is the exception, which makes him useful and dangerous in equal measure. Odin values him at first. Some sources say they even mixed their blood, swearing a bond that made Loki his sworn ally. When Odin needs cunning more than force, he often turns to this strange companion. Loki knows secrets that the more straightforward gods do not. He understands how to twist a promise and how to read an enemy. Yet Odin is also the god of wisdom and of sacrifice, and perhaps some part of him knows that he has taken a serpent into his house. Among the other gods, Loki is tolerated rather than loved. Thor, in particular, has reason to be both grateful and angry. There are stories in which Loki helps Thor retrieve his stolen hammer or walk unharmed into halls full of giants. There are others in which Loki causes the problem in the first place, then fixes it with great show, as if he enjoys playing both arsonist and fire brigade. At feasts, he takes pleasure in tearing at the reputations of his companions, flinging out accusations and half-truths. The poem known as The Flighting of Loki preserves such a quarrel, where he insults one god after another until finally driven from the hall. Even there, the insults bite because they are close to the bone. Loki knows where each god is weakest. To understand how closely he is woven into the fabric of Asgard, it helps to remember some of the tales where his mischief leads to wonders that become essential to the gods themselves. When a mysterious builder offers to construct a great wall around Asgard in a single season, asking in payment the sun, the moon, and the hand of the goddess Freya, it is Loki who persuades the gods to accept, trusting that the task will prove impossible. When the builder almost succeeds thanks to his tireless stallion, Loki becomes a mare, lures the horse away, and leaves the builder exposed as a giant in disguise. The gods kill the deceiver, keep their treasures, and later the mare Loki gives birth to an 8-legged foal. That foal becomes Sleipnir, Odin's uncanny horse, who carries him between worlds. In another famous tale, Loki cuts off the golden hair of Sif, the wife of Thor, either as a prank or from some deeper jealousy. Thor is ready to tear him limb from limb, and Loki must promise to restore what he has taken. He goes beneath the earth to the dwarfs, master smiths, and bargains for new hair of gold that will grow upon Sif's head. In the same journey, he manages to obtain from the craftsmen other wonders as well. They forge the spear Gungnir for Odin, which never misses its mark, and the ship Skidbladnir for Freya, which can be folded into a pouch but carries any number of warriors with full sails when unfolded. In a competition between dwarf smiths, they also make Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, with its short handle and terrible power. All of this comes from Loki's meddling. The world of the gods is richer, stronger, more armed because of him. Yet even in these early adventures, you can taste something bitter beneath the humor. Loki is rarely moved by loyalty. He is driven by a sort of restless curiosity and by the delight of seeing what happens when you nudge the world out of its proper line. He is also driven by fear when his tricks bring him to the edge of punishment. He will cheat or shapeshift or flatter his way out of trouble, but the memory of how he got there in the first place never quite fades. This uneasy combination of member and enemy, helper and saboteur, becomes darker when Loki starts a family of his own far from the shining halls of Asgard. In the east, in a forest of iron trees where the ground is said to be thick with old roots and rusted weapons, there lives a giantess named Angrboda. Her name means bringer of sorrow, and she is not soft. She is the kind of figure who belongs more in nightmares than in gentle tales, a woman whose arms could crush a warrior and whose eyes see far down harsh roads. With Angrboda, Loki fathers 3 children. They are not tame, they are not really children at all in any human sense, but living embodiments of fear and ruin. The first is a wolf. The tales call him Fenrir, or sometimes simply the Fenris wolf. He is born the size of a hound and grows every day, jaws thickening, shoulders swelling. His eyes are keen and hot. There is a cunning in him that looks too much like the cunning of his father. The second is a serpent. This is Jormungandr, the great world serpent. When he is young, he can coil in a barrel, but he lengthens with each day, scales hardening, coils tightening, tongue tasting the air, as if he expects to measure something vast. The third is a girl, Hel, whose body is divided in a way that no living creature should be. One side of her is like a living woman, pale and cold. The other is dark and marked like a corpse. You can imagine the whispers when the gods first hear of these three. Odin is not foolish. He knows that blood and prophecy run in the same channels. He goes out to learn more about the children of Loki and Angrboda, and what he hears is not comforting. The seers tell him that these beings are tied to the end. The wolf will one day swallow Odin himself. The serpent will fight with Thor and spew out poison that covers the earth. The girl will rule over an enormous realm of the dead and keep what she has been given. These are not descendants one can ignore. Odin decides, as he so often does, that harsh action now is better than disaster later. He sends for the three children, and the gods bring them into their world. For a time they will try to handle the problem by placing each monster where it seems most fitting, pretending that this is management rather than exile. First they deal with the serpent. The gods look at Jormungandr and see already that he will outgrow any cage they make on land. So Odin has him taken to the ocean that surrounds Midgard and flung into the deep. There the serpent begins to grow. He swims outwards, coils lengthening, until his body stretches around the entire world. In time he bites his own tail and rests in a ring beneath the waves, waiting. The presence of such a creature in the waters is a terrifying image, but it also fits the Norse sense of the sea as something unknowable and encircling, a danger that is always near the land, yet never fully visible. Sailors in those northern waters would have understood what it means to live next to a strength that can rise without warning. Next, they turn to the girl, Hel. Her divided body is a sort of sign that she belongs neither fully to the living nor fully to the dead. Odin decides that if she is bound to death, she may as well rule over it. He casts her down into the realm that would take her name, a cold and shadowed place far from the warmth of sunlit worlds. There, Hel becomes mistress of a hall with high walls and a gate that few can leave. Many of the dead who do not die in battle come to her, those who pass from old age, sickness, or misfortune. The sagas describe her hall in bleak language, with dishes that are hunger and knives that are famine, a bed called sickbed and curtains called misfortune. It is a grim parody of a noble dwelling, suited to a queen whose authority is absolute yet joyless. Of all three, it is the wolf who troubles the gods most. Fenrir is on land, within reach of Asgard. He grows fast. Day by day his shoulders rise, his teeth lengthen, his paws leave deeper marks in the earth. There is an intelligence in him that makes him more than a beast. He watches the gods with eyes that weigh and judge. At first, they keep him close rather than drive him away. They decide that if he is to grow so strong, better that he grow under their eyes. So Fenrir is raised in the realm of the gods themselves. Only one of them, Tyr, dares to feed him and stand near him without fear. Tyr is the god of law and binding oaths, but he is also a warrior willing to put his body behind his words. He and the young wolf form a strange bond, a closeness that will later make what happens between them even more painful. As the years pass, the gods begin to see that they have not solved the problem but cultivated it. Fenrir walks now like a living mountain, jaws easily big enough to bite a god in half. When he opens his His lower jaw scrapes the ground, and his upper jaw brushes the sky, or so the poets say. The gods tell themselves that he is still manageable, but in the private corners of their halls they confess that nothing in Asgard can hold him, should he choose to turn on them. Odin has not forgotten the prophecies. He knows that this wolf is the one fated to kill him at the end of days. Some part of him must wonder whether that future is completely fixed or whether action now can bend it. Yet in Norse myth, attempts to escape fate often twist into the very cords that bind it tighter. The gods decide that Fenrir must be bound, not as a prisoner of war might be bound, but in a way that makes it impossible for him to roam freely. To accomplish this, they resort to a test. They forge a heavy chain called loading and approach the wolf with smiles and jest. They suggest that it would be entertaining to see how strong he has become, to see whether he can break such a mighty restraint. Fenrir is not foolish. He eyes the chain and the gods, then allows them to wrap it around him. With a flex of his muscles and a jerk of his limbs, he snaps loading as if it were a twig. The gods murmur in admiration and pretend not to be alarmed. They retreat and forge a second chain, even stronger, which they call Dromi. Once more they propose a contest, a test of strength worthy of song. Fenrir, sensing the pride in their voices and his own growing power, submits again. This time, the chain resists longer, creaking and biting into his fur. But in the end, he surges against it and shatters it. Iron flies, fragments skid over the ground. The gods laugh with forced cheer. Voices a little too high. Inside, they feel the cold water of fear rising. Now they know no ordinary chain will hold him. They turn to the dwarfs, those master smiths of the hidden places of the world, and ask for something stranger. The dwarfs understand that this is no simple commission. They craft a binding that looks nothing like an iron chain. They call it Gleipnir. It is thin and soft, almost like a ribbon, smooth to the touch. Yet it is made from things that do not seem solid at all. The dwarfs list the ingredients with grave satisfaction. The sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. These things, the tale says, no longer exist in the world because they were used up in the making of Gleipnir. It is a playful way of explaining why such impossible items cannot be found. It is also a way of saying that the chain is woven from the gaps and secrets of reality, from negative space. Such a binding is hard to imagine and harder to break. Armed with Gleipnir, the gods go to an island called Lyngvi, which lies in a lake surrounded by steep shores. They invite Fenrir to join them there. The mood is light on the surface. They carry Gleipnir as if it were a toy. When the wolf sees the slender band, his eyes narrow. The gods say that this is only a little challenge, a bit of sport. Surely, if he could burst chains like Dromi, he can break this tiny thread. The contest will make his fame even greater. Fenrir looks from the ribbon to the faces around him. He has grown among these beings. He knows how they smile when they lie. The softness of Gleipnir alarms him more than any clank of iron. Something in him, perhaps some instinct for magic, understands that this is no ordinary restraint. He refuses to be bound unless one of the gods places a hand in his mouth as a pledge. If they are honest, if this is truly only a test, he will let the hand go when he is free. If they are deceiving him, the hand will be his payment. This demand spreads a moment of silence among the gods. They glance at one another, and no one steps forward. To place your hand in the jaws of Fenrir is to risk never drawing it back. Finally, Tyr, who has always fed the wolf and stood nearest him, steps forth. He extends his right hand and sets it in Fenrir's mouth. The trust between them, built over years, lies now between teeth and tongue. The other gods wrap Gleipnir around the wolf's legs and body. Then they give the signal. Fenrir strains. He twists and digs his claws into the ground. He throws his weight against the binding with all his might. The ribbon does not break. The more he fights, the tighter it draws. The gods sink Gleipnir's ends deep into the earth and fasten it with a heavy stone. They drive another iron weight into the ground, then anchor the bond even further. The wolf thrashes, realizing now that he has been tricked, that the talk of games was a lie. In that moment, Tyr does not pull away. He keeps his arm where he placed it, because a pledge is a pledge, even in betrayal. When Fenrir understands that he cannot break free, his jaws snap shut. Tyr's hand is severed at the wrist. Blood falls to the ground. The god of binding oaths has paid the price of this binding with his own body. From that day on, he walks one-handed. Fenrir howls. The sound is said to travel through all the worlds. A promise of hate. He snaps at anyone who comes near, so the gods thrust a sword into his mouth, the hilt against his lower jaw and the point between his upper jaws, forcing his mouth open. Slaver and blood fall from his tongue and become a river. Some tales give this river a name, a way of saying that even the drool of such a creature is not ordinary. Bound and gagged, he lies there, and the gods leave him. He is not dead. He is simply held until the day the bonds break. In this scene, you can feel the double edge of what the gods have done. On one hand, they have protected themselves and the worlds from a monster who almost certainly would one day have turned on them. On the other, they have broken trust with a being they raised among them and have maimed one of their own to do it. They have used deceit to solve a problem that prophecy created. In doing so, they have sharpened the hatred that waits inside the wolf. When the day of Ragnarok comes and Fenrir's bonds finally give way, his rage will not be fresh. It will be old, carefully cultivated by long years of choking helplessness. Loki watches all this. The sources do not always say where he stands or what he feels, as his son is bound and another of his children is thrown into the sea, and a third is thrown down into the realms of the dead. One can imagine him laughing or pretending not to care. One can also imagine a colder anger lodging in him, an understanding that the gods who enjoy his tricks are quick to turn on anything that frightens them. Whatever passes behind his eyes, the fact remains that his family is scattered and turned into instruments of doom. The world serpent sinks into the ocean, the wolf lies bound on the island, and hell reigns in the depths. Loki remains in Asgard for a time, still joking, still traveling, still solving problems that he has helped to cause. Yet the balance has shifted. There are now 3 great forces tied to his blood that reach into every corner of the cosmos: sea, death, teeth. When the seers of the North spoke of Ragnarok, they did not imagine the final war as a simple clash between heroes and villains. They imagined a reckoning between those who try to hold a fragile order together and those who have been chained, drowned, or exiled to preserve that order. Loki and his children stand at the heart of that storm. The gods will one day face not only their enemies, but the consequences of their own bargains. In the cold, bright world of Asgard, where storms roll over the roof of Thor and Odin sits among the rafters of ravens and runes, there is one figure whom no one fears. His name is Balder. The old poems call him the best of the gods and say that no unclean thing can be spoken in his hall. He is described as fair of face, with hair that seems to catch the light, and with a presence that softens tempers and brings quiet even to those who live by the sword. If Odin is the mind of the gods and Thor is their arm, Balder is something like their conscience and their hope. Around him, for a time, the world feels less harsh. He is the son of Odin and Frigg, queen of Asgard, and in him both parents see a promise. Odin, who has sacrificed eyes and comfort to see into dark futures, may look at Balder and imagine that there is still something pure in a world built from a corpse. Frigg, who knows many fates but seldom speaks them, surely looks at her son and wishes that knowledge were not always so heavy. For a long span of years that no one counts exactly, life in Asgard goes on with its usual mix of feasts and quarrels, travels and battles. Giants plot beyond the edges of the ordered world. Men in Midgard hunt and sow and kill one another and tell stories about the gods who live above them. Loki moves among the halls with his quick smile and sharper jokes. The wolf lies bound on his island. The serpent sleeps in the deep. Hel sits on her high chair in her silent hall. Then Balder begins to dream. The dreams are not like ordinary wanderings of the sleeping mind. They are heavy and repeat themselves with a grim patience. Night after night, Balder sees shadows closing in upon him. He sees himself fall, pale and silent, and the world around him grow colder. In some versions of the tale, he sees flames and darkness and hears distant wolves. In others, the images are vaguer, but the feeling is the same. Doom has turned its eye toward him. Balder is not a coward. He has grown up in the same world as Thor and Tyr, but the dreams gnaw at him. Even a brave man can be broken by what he cannot fight, by a phantom that returns each time his head touches a pillow. In the end, he goes to the council of the gods and tells them what he has seen. There is concern, and there is a kind of irritation as well. The gods are used to facing threats with weapon and stratagem. A dream is harder to strike. Odin listens longest and most intently. He knows that dreams can come from the roots of the world tree and from the lips of the dead. He suspects that this is not the result of bad meat or an unsettled mind. Something deeper is moving. In the sources that have come down to us, there is a short poem called Balder's Draumar, The Dreams of Balder. In it, Odin takes the matter into his own hands in the way that only he can. He saddles Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, and rides out of Asgard. The journey he takes is not through open sky, but downward, toward the regions where the dead lie. He comes to a mound, a high grave from an older time, set aside for a woman who had once spoken prophecies in life. Around it are offerings, but now they seem stale, a gesture from people who do not really want to hear answers. Odin dismounts and walks around the grave, chanting secret words. The earth stirs The dead seeress rises grudgingly from her rest, called up by a god who never leaves the hidden things hidden if he can help it. They speak, the living and the dead. Odin hides his name at first, calling himself by some other title. He asks her why the benches in Hell's halls are covered with fresh straw, and why the drinking vessels are polished and ready. The seeress answers that they are preparing a welcome for Balder, who will soon come to their realm. With each question, Odin tries to push the doom further away, as if clarity could be delayed by stubbornness. With each answer, the truth comes closer. At last, she calls him by his real name and tells him that his effort is useless. Balder will die. The seeress sinks back into the earth, and even Odin must ride away with less comfort than he brought. When Frigg hears all this, something in her refuses to accept it. She is not a god of war or schemes. She is a mother. If the world itself has turned against her son, she will speak to the world. She takes an idea from the customs of her time. Among the people of the North, oaths are serious things, binding words that shape behavior. What if she could convince everything that exists not to hurt Balder? Not just everyone. Everything. They gather in the Thing Place, a field where matters are often decided. Balder stands there, unarmed and unafraid, while the others form a loose circle around him. One by one they pick up whatever is at hand and hurl it at him. A stone that would shatter a door bounces off his chest as if it were made of feather. A spear that could skewer a giant glances aside without even tearing his tunic. Thor throws his hammer in a carefully measured arc. It strikes Balder squarely and rebounds, harmless as a tossed apple. The gods laugh, not cruelly, but with the laughter of people who think for a moment that they have found a corner of the world where nothing bad can happen. Some scholars looking back have seen in this scene hints of rituals in which a chosen person might stand for a god who is struck in a ceremonial way. But in the story as we have it, the main point is clear. The gods have turned prophecy into a game. They stand there, amused, while fate waits and watches. Loki watches as well. He had not known about the oaths until he saw the sport. Now he is curious. His mind works along lines that others do not like to follow. He wonders if there is some flaw in this arrangement, some small crack where danger can seep through. The desire to know that, and perhaps the darker desire to see what will happen when everything breaks, begins to grow in him. He goes to Frigg not as himself, but disguised as an old woman. That is one of his favorite forms when he wants answers. In the hall where she sits, Frigg receives this seeming crone with courtesy. They speak of the marvel that Balder cannot be injured. Loki, in his borrowed voice, asks how such a thing can be. Frigg, pleased and perhaps a little proud of her work, explains that she has taken oaths from every being and every substance. The old woman asks the natural question, every single thing. There is a pause. Frigg admits that there was one little shoot she omitted. East of the hall, she says, there grows a young plant called mistletoe. It seemed too small and too young to be dangerous. She did not ask it to swear. Loki leaves her then, mind turning as quick as a fish in a stream. He goes out to find the plant. Mistletoe is a strange thing. It does not grow from seed sown in soil, but from berries spread by birds. It lives on the branches of other trees, sinking its roots into them and drawing sustenance, something between a guest and a parasite. Among later Christians, it would become a symbol of peace or stolen kisses. Here, in this older tale, it is still only a pale green growth clinging to an oak or apple in the cold air. Loki cuts a piece of it and shapes it into a dart, or perhaps a slender spear. In some tellings, it is little more than a twig. In others, it is a crafted weapon. What matters is that it is the one thing in the world that has not promised to spare Balder. Back in the gathering place, the game continues. Gods hurl stones and spears and laugh as they bounce away. In the midst of this circle of bold throwers stands a figure who is not joining the sport. This is Hodra, brother of Balder, a strong god but blind. He hears the shouts and the laughter and knows something is happening, but he cannot see the center of it. He stands a little apart, staff in hand, perhaps feeling both curiosity and a sting of exclusion. Loki approaches Hodra with the mistletoe in his hand and a bright eagerness in his voice. "Why do you not throw something at Balder?" he asks. Hodra answers with the obvious. He cannot see where Balder stands and has nothing to throw besides. Loki offers to solve both problems. He places the shaft of mistletoe in Hodra's hand and guides his arm. He promises to direct the throw so that Hodra will share in the amusement, like the others. There is no sense in the sources that Hodra knows what he is doing. He trusts the voice at his ear. He draws back his arm and casts the mistletoe, thinking that he is joining a harmless sport. The little weapon flies true, guided by a mind that knows exactly where to send it. It strikes Balder full in the chest. There is a sound, but it is not a laugh. It is a quiet, ugly sound of something entering flesh. The mistletoe shaft pierces Balder where nothing else could. The only thing in the world that did not swear to spare him fulfills the old prophecy in an instant. Balder falls. The silence that falls with him is heavy. The gods stare, stunned, as if the fabric of their world has suddenly torn in front of their eyes. They are beings used to dealing out death, but not here, not like this. Frigg cries out. Odin, who has seen this in glimpses, feels the weight of having been right. Hodra stands there, blind and bewildered, gripping the empty air where the shaft once was. Loki, if he is still visible, has already begun to move away. What follows is not battle but grief. Balder lies dead, and the gods must decide what to do with the body of their brightest one. They build a pyre that is also a ship. Balder's vessel is called Hringhorni, said to be the largest of all ships. They haul it down to the sea, but it is so vast that they cannot move it. They send for a giantess named Hyrrokin, who comes riding a wolf with serpents as reins. With a single shove, she pushes the ship into the water, so hard that the earth shakes and the rollers under the keel burst into flame. They lay Balder upon the deck. His wife Nanna, overcome with grief, dies as well and is placed beside him. His horse is led to the ship, saddled and bridled, to accompany him to the other world. Thor lifts his hammer and consecrates the pyre, perhaps with the same gesture he uses in blessings and marriages, a reminder that fire and union walk close together in this mythology. As the ship is set ablaze and pushed out, a dwarf named Lita runs beneath Thor's feet, or stands in the wrong place, and Thor, irritable in his sorrow, kicks him into the flames. The writers preserve this small and grim detail as if to say that death attends death, chaos attends grief. While the smoke rises and the ship burns on the water, the gods think about what can still be done. The dead go to different places in this cosmos. Warriors chosen by Odin and Freya find their way to halls of battle and beauty. Others go to the cold realm of Hel. Balder, though he is a god, has died a death that leads him to Hel's hall. Frigg asks if any among them will ride down to Hel and ask for Balder's release. It is Odin's son Hermod who volunteers. He takes Sleipnir and travels for 9 nights through dark valleys that no living man has seen. At last he comes to the river Gjoll and crosses the bridge that spans it, which is said to be roofed with shining gold. The maiden who guards the bridge is surprised that the sound of his horse echoes so loudly, as if more riders than one had passed. It is a hint that Hermod carries not just his own life, but the weight of all the hopes behind him. He rides on to the gates of Hel's hall. With a great leap, Sleipnir carries him over them, rather than simply through, as if to show that this is a visit and not a submission. Inside, he finds Balder seated in a high place, pale but unhurt. The hall of Hel is described as large and cold, with long tables and a gloom as heavy as wet wool. Hermod spends the night there. In the morning, he goes before Hel herself and makes his plea. She answers in a measured way. She will let Balder return to the gods, she says, if every single thing in the world weeps for him. Not only people, not only gods, everything that exists. If all weep, it will show that Balder is truly as beloved as they claim. If any refuse, he must stay where he is. Hermod returns to Asgard with this condition, and the gods send messengers out into all the worlds. The news goes from hall to hut, from stone to stream. It is said that men and women weep, and so do beasts and birds. Fire crackles with a sound like sorrow. Metals ring in a lower tone. Trees shed leaves like tears. Stones sweat moisture. Even the ground seems to grieve. In some retellings, this is the one moment when the entire creation is united in feeling. Then the messengers come to a cave where a giantess sits. Her name is Thok, which may mean something like thanks or a grudging noise, or it may be a name chosen because it sounds rough. They tell her of Balder and ask her to weep with the rest. She looks at them with a flat eye and refuses. Let Hel keep what she has, she says. She claims that Balder never gave her any joy and that she owes him no tears. The messengers suspect what we are meant to suspect. Thok may not be a true giantess. She may be Loki in another shape, hiding in the shadows as he so often does. Whether this is true or not, the effect is the same. Because one being refuses to weep, Hel's condition is not met. Balder must remain in her hall. The gods hear this and understand that the door has closed. Their brightest one will not walk among them again in this age. He will sit on his high seat in Hel's realm until the end of days, when he is fated to return in a new world. In the meantime, there is an empty place in Asgard, and there is an anger that does not easily find a target. Odin looks at Hodra, the blind god whose hand cast the killing dart. In some traditions, he has another son, Vali, conceived for the sole purpose of vengeance. Vali grows to full strength in a single day and kills Hoda. Violence answers violence. Yet even this does not truly settle accounts, because Hoda was a tool, not the mind behind the deed. That mind belongs to Loki. His act is not a careless prank, but a deliberate choice to tear out the heart of the divine family. After some time, during a feast in the hall of the sea giant Aegir, Loki's simmering malice boils over. In the poem called The Flighting of Loki, he stands in the midst of the gods and pours out insults on each of them, dragging up old shames and secrets. When they finally drive him out with weapons in their hands, the decision is made. The time has come to catch the trickster and bind him as they bound his son. Loki flees. He goes into the mountains and builds a house with 4 doors so he can watch in every direction. By day, he sits in the form of a salmon in the streams, sleek and hard to grasp, and he thinks about how to avoid nets. He ties cords together in a pattern that will become the first fishnet, then burns it when he hears the footsteps of his pursuers. Odin, who is not easily fooled, reads the pattern in the ashes and understands the idea. The gods weave their own net, go down to the water, and drag the river. Loki swims, quick and clever, but Thor stands at the end of the stream. When the salmon tries to leap past him, Thor snatches him by the tail. To this day, people in the north joke that this was why salmon have such narrow tails. The gods bind Loki in his own shape and take him away to a cave. There they bring 2 of his sons. In some tellings, their names are Nafi and Vali. The gods turn one of the boys into a wolf, and in his frenzy he tears his brother apart. They take the entrails of the slain son and use them as cords to tie Loki to 3 stones. 1 under his shoulders, 1 under his loins, 1 under his knees. When the cords have been fastened, they transform into iron chains. The cruelty of the scene is not softened. Loki, who has sown the deaths of others, sees his own child turned into tool and ruin. Above him, the gods hang a serpent that drips venom from its fangs onto his face. The poison burns like fire where it touches skin. His wife Sigyn stays beside him, holding a bowl above his head to catch the falling drops. For long stretches of time she stands there, arms aching, keeping the venom from him. Only when the bowl is full must she turn away to empty it. In those moments, the poison falls on Loki's face, and he writhes against his bonds so violently that the earth itself shakes. People feel these tremors and call them earthquakes. So Loki lies bound beneath the worlds he has troubled, with the memory of his son's screams in his ears, and venom scoring lines of pain into his skin. Above, the gods live on, but the ground beneath them has changed. Balder is gone. The wolf waits. The serpent sleeps around the rim of the world. In the dark, the one who helped set all this in motion twists and endures, nursing a hatred as patient as frost. The bright death of Balder did not bring the sky down at once. After the burning ship had slipped beneath the waves, and the smoke had thinned into the upper air, life in the worlds went on. The gods still walked the fields of Asgard. Thor still swung his hammer against giants that pushed too near the borders. Men in Midgard still sowed grain and swung axes, and told stories on long nights. Yet something in the pattern had shifted. The death of the best of the gods was like a stone dropped into a vast, still lake. The first ripples were small, hardly felt. In time, they would reach every shore. The old seeress who speaks in the prophecy of the seeress tells it in a few tight lines. She speaks of brothers who will fight brothers and break the bonds that once held them. She speaks of an axe season, a sword season, of wind and wolves. To understand what that means, you have to imagine what winter already meant in the north, before any talk of the last days. For the people who first shaped these tales, winter was the season that tested every choice they had made in the year. If they had cut enough hay, the animals lived. If they had misjudged the weather, the animals died, and so might their children. Snow could trap a farmstead for weeks. Sea ice could seal harbors. A bad winter brought hunger and quiet graves dug in frozen ground. They knew that the world could turn cruel simply by staying cold for too long. So when their singers spoke of the great winter, Fimbulwinter, they were not inventing some strange new monster. They were stretching a real fear out beyond the normal limits. Fimbulwinter is described as 3 winters that follow one another with no summers between. Snow falls from every side. The sun climbs in the sky but gives little warmth. The winds never quite settle. Rivers freeze so hard that their ice can bear armies. But no armies march because every hall is too busy trying not to starve. In earlier winters, men and women might look forward to the thaw, to the sound of dripping eaves and the return of green. In this great winter, there is no such promise. One year passes into the next with no true spring. Old stores of grain are eaten and not replaced. Forests are stripped of game. Sweating smiths stand in cold forges because there is no spare fuel for ironwork. Hunger gnaws at more than bellies. It eats at the customs that keep people human. The ancient poem says that in those years brother will kill brother, and children will strike their parents. It is not only a matter of rage. When there is not enough to go around, the ties of kin that once gave protection can become a threat. A man with many relatives may also have many rivals for the last loaf. Law, which in the north grew from the gathering of free men around stones and under open sky, begins to fray. The Thing meetings where disputes were settled and fines agreed become rare or meaningless. Why pay a fine when silver cannot be eaten and the man you owe may not live till the next snow melt? Why honor an oath when your children are crying in the dark? Saga writers who lived centuries after these myths were first sung still remembered what it felt like when kin turned on kin and the land was eaten bare. Icelandic stories tell of winters when people boiled leather to chew, when they ground bark into their flour, when they slipped out at night to take what they needed from a neighbor's store. Fimbulwinter is that memory taken to the level of myth. It is a picture of human society turned inside out by cold. But the signs of coming Ragnarok are not only in the hunger of men, they write themselves into the sky. Remember the wolves that have chased sun and moon since the first days. Skoll runs after the bright chariot of the sun. Hati follows the pale path of the moon. Day after day they draw near, their paws finding purchase in the strange air of the upper sky, their breath a thin frost in the heights. Each sunset, each eclipse, might be a moment when jaws close and light almost vanishes, only to return again. During the years of Fimbulwinter, those chases grow shorter. Perhaps people in Midgard glance up more often, wondering why the light seems weaker even on clear days. Then, one day in that steel-colored sky, Skoll catches the sun. The stories say that he swallows it whole. There is no great explosion described, only the cruel simplicity of a mouth closing and light going out. Night falls at a time when day should still have been long. Cold deepens in a way that has nothing to do with weather. If any fires still burn in hall hearths, they seem very small. Not long after, his brother catches the moon. Hati closes his jaws, and the gentle light that has guided hunters and sailors since the first voyages is gone. For a brief time, the stars burn alone, scattered sparks above a world that no longer knows dawn or dusk, only a steady black vault. Then the stars themselves are said to vanish. It is as if the skull of Ymir that the gods once raised as a sky has finally cracked. At the same time, voices are heard that are not human. On the plain outside the halls of Valhalla, where the chosen dead train each day with spear and sword, a rooster begins to crow. His name is Gollinkambi, Golden Comb, and his cry is not thin and homely. It is a blast of sound that cuts through the restless whisper of armor and talk. He stands high on a gable and calls a warning that the warriors might not yet understand, though they feel their hands tighten on their weapon hilts. In the world of giants, somewhere among cliffs and black forests, another rooster answers. His feathers are perhaps a darker color, his voice rougher. He wakes the ancient enemies of the gods and tells them that the time they have been waiting for is close. Down in hell, in that realm of cold halls and slow fires, a third bird shakes its wings. Some say this one is flame red, that its feathers gleam like live coals. Its cry rouses the dead who still remember battle and hate, stirring their old wounds. These three calls give a strange rhythm to the ending of things. It is not only an abstract doom, it is a muster, a rallying of hosts on every side. The warriors in Valhalla who thought they were training for honor now learn that they were also training for an actual war. The giants who brooded on past defeats now feel their anger burn hot again. The dead in hell, who had settled into long waiting, now hear that there is one more struggle ahead. As all of this unfolds, the world tree Yggdrasil begins to feel the strain. The poets say that it shudders from root to crown. The dragon below gnaws with new fury. The squirrel runs faster with its messages of malice. The deer that graze upon its leaves rear back in fright as the branches sway. At the Well of Erd, the Norns stand and watch. They still sprinkle water and white mud on the bark, trying to keep it whole. But they also know that the fates they once carved will not be uncarved. The creaking of the great ash echoes through all the worlds, as if a ship much larger than any known vessel is grinding across stone. Mountains shake. Those who live under the earth are not spared. The dwarfs in their carved halls hear stone dust fall from the ceilings and see their lamps flicker. In some versions of the story, they groan in fear at every doorway, knowing that the age of miners and smiths is sliding away. In the deep places near Niflheim, a hound begins to howl. His name is Garm, and he is chained in front of a cave or a rocky cleft. His eyes blaze, his chest is stained with blood. Each time he pulls at his bonds, They scrape on stone with a sound that travels outward like a crack in ice. Later tellers would say that Garm and the wolf Fenrir are echoes of the same terror. But here he is a separate guardian whose agitation means that barriers are weakening. In Midgard, the few humans who have not yet murdered one another for food or fallen to the cold can sense that they are walking on thin crust above forces they do not understand. The old stories about the gods that once brought comfort by the fire now carry a different weight. If Balder, who was best of all, is dead, what chance do ordinary people have? Yet even here, in sagas and later tales, there are hints that a man and a woman will find shelter in the wood of Yggdrasil and endure. For the moment, though, such hope is no more than a rumor carried by storytellers who do not like to end in blackness. In Asgard itself, Odin sees all this and knows that the pattern he has anticipated is now unfolding in earnest. The winter that never ends, the sky that darkens, the roosters that call, the tree that shudders, all these are notes in a song he has heard in fragments ever since he hung on the tree and gave his eye for knowledge. The end is no longer a distant riddle. It is weather. It is noise. It is pressure you can feel in the stones of the floor. Soon, the forces that have been waiting at the edges will begin to move. The great winter did not end with a thaw. It ended with a breaking. Deep in the hidden cave where Loki lay bound, the serpent still dripped venom from its jaws. Sigyn still held the bowl above her husband's face and still turned away when it filled. Each time she moved to empty it, venom fell upon Loki's cheeks and eyes, and he writhed so hard that the ground shook. Men on the surface felt those tremors as earthquakes. They did not know that the quaking came from a god in pain. For long years, that shaking had been an irregular thing, fierce but brief, followed by slow stretches of stillness. During Fimbulwinter, as hunger and murder spread through Midgard and wolves ran the sky, the quakes came more often. The chains that held Loki had been forged from the entrails of his own son and turned to iron with divine craft. Even so, iron grows old. Stone wears. The earth itself tires of its burdens. At last there came a day when Sigyn turned away with the full bowl, and the venom fell again. Loki arched against his bonds with all the hatred and misery that had built up in him since the death of Balder. The chains strained, the iron groaned. Then, with a sound like the snapping of the world tree's roots, they gave way. The stones that anchored the chains cracked and toppled. Loki lay there for a moment stunned, no longer held, feeling his own limbs free for the first time since his capture. Above him, the serpent recoiled, its slow venom spilling onto bare rock. Sigyn still stood with her bowl in her hands, unsure whether to stay with the husband who had brought so much ruin, or to flee from what he had now become. The old stories fall silent here. They do not say what she chose, they only say that Loki rose. He was not the same figure who once sat at feasts trading jests with Thor. Venom had marked him. Grief and humiliation had burned away any lingering warmth he might have felt for the gods. He had watched his sons die, or be turned into instruments of punishment. He had listened through stone to the distant sounds of Asgard's laughter. Now, with the world shuddering and the sky gone dark, he smiled a thin, hard smile and moved toward his revenge. Far from that cave, On the island in the lake where the wolf lay, other bonds felt the strain. Gleipnir had never been an ordinary chain. It was made from the sound of a cat's steps, from the beard of a woman, from the roots of a mountain, from the sinews of a bear, from the breath of a fish, and from the spittle of a bird. It had held against all of Fenrir's efforts, while the gods still walked in confidence beneath a bright sun. Now the sun had been swallowed. The roosters in Valhalla and in giant lands and in hell had cried out. Yggdrasil shook as if each of its roots were being tugged in a different direction. The lake around Lyngvi churned with restless water. Fenrir felt it all. The hatred that had been smoldering in him since the day Tyr lost his hand now flared. He strained against Gleipnir with a strength born of prophecy and years of rage. The slender ribbon bit into his fur and flesh. The stones it was fastened to ground deeper into the bedrock. The sword that had been jammed in his jaw cut his gums and tongue. Blood and foam poured from his mouth and ran into the river that already bore his slaver. Then, suddenly, the impossible chain made of impossible things snapped. It did not snap like ordinary cord. It unmade itself. The properties that had kept it whole ceased to bind. Fenrir surged upward. The sword clattered from his mouth and fell into the churning water. He stood, huge and shaggy, and shook himself. Blood flew in wide arcs from his muzzle. Each drop that struck the ground seemed to smoke. He lifted his head and sniffed the air. He smelled ice and fire and fear. He smelled the salt of the great sea and the dry dust of giant halls. Above all, he smelled the familiar, bitter scent of the gods. He turned his steps in their direction. In Niflheim, the hound Garm tore free of his chains in front of the cave. In the sagas that mention him, he is a huge beast with a chest already wet with blood from ancient battles. As the bonds gave way, he shook his head and howled, and the sound ran through the lower worlds like a wind through narrow streets. Whatever he had once guarded was no longer meant to be kept in. In the ocean that surrounds Midgard, the vast body of Jormungandr stirred. For an age he had lain coiled around the world, tail in his own mouth, a living circle beneath the waves. He had watched the passing of ships above him as dim shadows. He had felt the weight of ice pressing down in winters and the long, slow pulse of currents in summers. Now the pull that held him in a great ring slackened. With a long, slow movement, he opened his jaws and let his tail slip free. The circle broke. He began to uncoil, and as he did, the water around him heaved and rose. His head came up, then his neck, then coil after coil of massive scaled body. Seas roared, coasts flooded. Ships that still clung to harbors during the great winter were lifted and thrown like toys. Poison dripped from his tongue. Some tales say that as he moved, he spat venom into the air so that it misted over land and sky, poisoning the very breath of living things. To the men of the north, who knew that the sea could turn from road to grave with a single storm, the image of a serpent big enough to churn every wave at once was not far from a real fear, made grander and stranger. While ice cracked and seas rose, far in the north or east, along some bleak shore of Jotunheim, giants gathered around a ship. This was Naglfar, the nail ship. It had been building quietly for a very long time, though no one swung hammers on its hull. Instead, every untrimmed nail of every dead man and woman added itself to its substance. Each funeral where proper rites were neglected, each burial where the nails were left long through laziness or poverty or haste, fed this vessel of doom. By the time Fimbulwinter had finished its 3-year feast upon humanity, Naglfar was complete. It loomed at the edge of a black sea, built entirely from the keratin that once grew at the ends of mortal fingers and toes. Many later preachers used this image to warn the living to keep their dead trimmed, as if good grooming could slow the coming of the end. Whether or not anyone took this seriously, the picture of a ship made of the most overlooked parts of the body stayed fixed in the myth. It is a reminder that neglect has consequences, even in the smallest things. The giants who had brooded on the shore now pushed Naglfar from its place. A captain stood at its prow. Some sources name him Hrim, a giant whose name flickers in the old poems. Others say that Loki himself took the tiller after breaking free, steering the ship of the dead through churning waters toward the final battlefield. Either way, the decks of Naglfar filled with grim shapes. Frost giants clambered aboard, their breath smoking in the cold air, their eyes bright with the hope of vengeance. From the burning world of Muspel came a different host. Fire giants marched under a sky that still glowed red in their own land. At their head strode Surt, whose name means black. He carried a sword that shone brighter than any sun, a blade of pure burning that had slept for ages in his hand. Each step he took left embers in his footprints. The path from Muspel into the ordered worlds crossed the rainbow bridge called Bifrost, that bright arc that had once been a sign of beauty between Asgard and Midgard. Now, as the host of Muspel rode across it, flames licked along its span. The weight and fire of the marching giants were more than the bridge could bear. The old stories say that Bifrost shattered under them, torn apart by the very powers it had once carried. Colors broke like glass. Fragments of light fell into the chasm between worlds. Heimdall stood at his post, as he always had, keen eyes catching every detail. He could hear grass grow and wool on sheep backs. He could certainly hear the grind of Naglfar's hull and the tramp of Surt's army. He took up the horn Gjallarhorn, the loud horn, and lifted it to his lips. The sound that came out was not music. It was a single long note that cut through every other sound in the worlds. Warriors in Valhalla dropped their cups and seized their shields when they heard it. Giants paused on their decks or in their ranks and grinned, knowing that the time they had waited for had arrived. Even the dead in hell shifted on their benches. The horn's call reached under mountains to the dwarfs and along the branches of Yggdrasil to the deer and the eagle. It woke whatever had not yet understood that this was the great hour. In Asgard, the gods heard the horn and rose. Odin, who had known for so long that this day would come, still felt the chill run up his spine. He could hear in the horn blast not only danger, but the end of waiting. He moved at once to do the last things that could still be done. He saddled Sleipnir, that strange horse whose 8 legs carried him faster than any other steed. He rode not first to the armory or the drill field, but to the roots of Yggdrasil, down to the well of Mimir. The well lay in the giant lands, and Mimir's head still guarded it, preserved by herbs and magic from decay. Odin had given one of his eyes for a drink here long ago. Now, at the end of all his seeking, he came back for a final counsel. We are not told every word that passed between the one-eyed god and the severed head. The writers only say that Odin spoke with Mimir and received wisdom. Perhaps he asked if there was any path that avoided the fated outcome. Perhaps he already knew the answer and came only to stand once more at the place where he had first bound himself to knowledge. Whatever insight he gained, when he took the road back to Asgard, his face was set. Up in the halls of Valhalla, the Einherjar were already assembling. These were the slain warriors whom Odin and Freya had chosen from battlefields across the ages. Each day they had fought for sport, wounds closing at dusk. Each evening they had feasted on the endlessly renewed flesh of the boar sire Hymnir and drunk mead from the udder of the goat Heidrun. Songs had been sung of their future role, but it had all seemed distant. Something to brag about between mouthfuls of roast meat. Now they strapped on their real armor. The sagas say that Valhalla has 540 doors, and that 800 warriors can go out at the same time through each one. These are numbers more symbolic than precise, a way of saying that the host is beyond counting. They form ranks in shining mail and steel, each man bearing the weapons he had known in life. To a Viking skald who sang these tales, this was a pleasing image. No warrior wants to think that his courage ends with a spear through the ribs. Better to imagine that his fight continues on a greater field. The gods armed themselves as well. Thor tightened the belt that doubled his strength, Megingjord, around his waist, and drew on the iron gloves that let him grip the hammer Mjolnir. He called for his chariot, drawn by the goats Tangnjost and Tangrisnir, whose names mean something like Tooth Grinder and Tooth Ganasha. Their hooves struck sparks from the clouds as they pawed the ground, ready to carry him to meet the serpent that churned the sea. Tyr flexed his one remaining hand and strapped his shield. He knew that he would face Garm, the bloody-chested hound, and that the fight would not end well for either of them. Freya went to his own hall and called for his boar Gullinbursti, whose bristles shone like gold. When he reached for his famous sword, the blade that fought on its own in battle, he grasped empty air. He had given it away long ago in exchange for the love of the giant maiden Gerda. That youthful bargain now returned like an old debt. Freya set his jaw and took up a simple antler or lesser blade instead. He would go to meet Surt without the weapon that might have given him victory. Frigg moved through the halls of Asgard, looking at the faces of those she loved, knowing that many of them she would not see again. Her earlier attempt to protect Balder by taking oaths from all things had failed. There was nothing she could do now to shield the others from the storm that bore down on them. The lesser gods and goddesses made their own preparations. Heimdall set Gjallarhorn by his side once more and took up his sword. Bragi, the god of poetry, girded himself for a battle that no eloquence could avoid. Idun, keeper of the apples that held off age, looked at her fruit and understood that even the gods cannot eat their way out of fate forever. When all was ready, Odin led the host from Asgard. They rode or marched down from their shining city into the shadowed lower lands. Bifrost was shattered, so their way was not so simple as before. Some traditions say they crossed a different bridge or strode through the air itself. Others are quiet on the practicalities, concerned more with the image of a great shining host moving together toward a single place. That place was the field called Vigrid. Vigrid is described in the old sources as a terrible plain, a level field that stretches for 100 leagues in every direction. It is empty, waiting, a place without walls or shelter. To the people of the north, whose fights often took place in cramped ship decks or narrow valleys, such a broad battleground would have seemed almost otherworldly, even without giants and monsters on it. That emptiness fits the nature of this last contest. There is nowhere to hide. There is nowhere to fall back. There is only meeting. From one side came Naglfar, carrying Loki and the giant captains and whatever dead hell had sent to fill its ranks. Cracked ice floated beside the hull. Frost flakes and broken nails stuck to the planks. On board, weapons glinted in hands, long, rotten, or newly armed, depending on which teller you follow. From another side came Jormungandr, his coils raising waves that crashed upon the plain. Where his belly scraped the seabed, it tore up long scars that would later be riverbeds or chasms. His head moved from side to side above the water, golden eyes fixed upon some distant shape that only he could see. From the rim of the world came Surt and the fiery army of Muspel, their swords and spears casting a glare that turned the dark sky into a moving furnace. Each breath they exhaled steamed and shimmered in the air. From below and from behind hills and broken rocks came Fenrir, shoulders brushing peaks, jaws parting in a grin that was all hunger and hate. Foam dripped from his teeth. His eyes gleamed with the memory of the day the gods had tricked him on the island. Every step he took brought a gust of air that smelled like slaughter. From Asgard and from the green field, it of all came Odin and the Aesir, followed by the great wings of the Einherjar ranks. Their banners snapped in cold wind, their horses snorted, their armor clinked and thudded in rough time with their hearts. All of them were heading toward the same wide space, drawn as if by lines carved long ago at the Well of Urd. At first there was no sound on Vigrid but the wind. It moved across the flat land with a steady, dry rush, stirring ash where nothing yet burned, bending the few dead grasses that still clung to the soil. The plain seemed to stretch forever, an empty stage under a sky that had forgotten the sun and the moon. Above, the black vault loomed, lit only now and then by the faint glow that leaked from Muspel and by the dull shine of steel and scale and armor. On one side of that immense space stood the hosts of Asgard and of Valhalla. Odin sat on Sleipnir at their head, his one eye hard as flint. Around him the Aesir stood in their ranks, bright with gold and silver and iron that no longer promised safety. Behind them, in ordered lines, waited the Einherjar, the slain warriors of many ages. Shields overlapping, spears angling forward like a forest turned to metal. On the other side, the giants and the dead gathered beneath tattered banners. The hull of Naglfar had been run aground like a beached whale, its decks crowded with frost giants and grim shades. Jormungandr reared at the edge of the flooded plain, his massive coils heaving in the dark water. Fenrir loped along the flank of the host, his shoulders higher than the tallest hall in Asgard, his fur thick with old frost and dried blood. From behind them marched the fire giants of Muspel, with Surt towering above his warriors, his burning sword held low so that its light threw monstrous shadows across the ground. For a heartbeat or two, all these forces faced one another without moving. It was as if the universe itself held its breath. Then Odin lifted Gungnir. The spear that had never missed, the weapon that had been forged in dwarven forges when the world was young, rose straight and bright in his hand. He spoke words that the skulls did not preserve, but that the ravens would remember. Then, with a shout, he drove Sleipnir forward. The host of the gods surged after him. Hooves struck the hard ground. The clang of armor and the rattle of mail rang out. War cries in many tongues rose together. A rough choir of men who had learned in life to love the moment when battle finally comes and waiting ends. The enemy answered. Giants bellowed and beat their shields with axe hafts. Hell's dead marched forward with the slow, steady step of those who no longer fear wounds. Jormungandr writhed and opened his vast jaws, spewing venom that hissed when it touched the earth. Fenrir broke into a run, each stride earth-shaking. When the two hosts met, the sound was like a mountain falling on a mountain. The sagas do not give us every detail. They do not list each clash of shield against spear, each shout of alarm or victory. They point instead to certain points on the field, bright knots where the greatest forces met, and they tell us what happened there. Odin rode straight toward the wolf. He had known this meeting was coming since he sat under the hanging bodies in his own hall and listened to the prophecies of the dead. He had seen glimpses of it in Mimir's well and in the runes he tore from the world tree. Still, the knowing of a thing is not the same as standing in front of it. As he approached Fenrir, the wolf seemed to grow with every pace, his shadow spreading like spilled ink across the plain. The god held Gungnir leveled. His ravens wheeled above him, uncertain where to land on a field where so much flesh would soon lie. Sleipnir's 8 legs thundered on the ground, carrying his rider with a speed no normal horse could match. Odin was a war god as well as a wanderer. This was not the first time he had hurled his spear at the start of a battle and declared his enemies given over to death. Now, he did so for the last time. Fenrir opened his jaws. Old verses say that when the wolf gaped, his lower jaw scraped the earth and his upper jaw brushed the sky, as if he meant to swallow not only a single god, but the whole world. Hot breath rolled out of his throat, rank with the stink of old chains and long hatred. His eyes burned with a light that had nothing to do with fire. Odin cast Gungnir. The spear flew true, as it always had, but this was the end of things, and rules that had once held no longer did. Fenrir lunged forward through its arc. The weapon glanced off his thick hide or buried itself without slowing him. In another moment, Odin and his horse were within the line of those jaws. The wolf closed his mouth. Skalds were not kind in their image of what followed. They say simply that the All-Father was swallowed whole. The god who had given kings their right and poets their inspiration, who had stood at the center of so many stories, vanished into the dark of Fenrir's gullet in a single ugly motion. For a heartbeat, even in the roar of battle, some part of the field must have felt the shock of that loss. The leader of the gods had fallen. His spear had failed. His wisdom had led him here and could not lead him out again. But the story does not end in that bite. It twists. From another part of the host stepped a figure who seldom speaks in the poems. Vidar, son of Odin, was known as the silent god, the one who liked to dwell in a thick-grown land where the trees stood close together. There was a saying that he was almost as strong as Thor, but he had lived largely outside the center of the tales, a quiet power waiting. Vidar wore on one foot a remarkable shoe. It was made, the old tradition says, from scraps of leather that every shoemaker had thrown away since men first began to shape leather to their feet. Each time some craftsman cut a pattern and trimmed an edge, the leftover bit, if it was not used for anything else, belonged to Vidar. Over ages, the god had gathered these cast-off pieces and fashioned from them a single thick shoe. It was padding and armor and symbol all in one. Now Vidar came forward through the crush, his jaws set. He said no words. He carried no famous spear. When he reached Fenrir, he leapt. He planted the thick shoe in the wolf's lower jaw, driving it down against the ground. With his hands, he seized the upper jaw and pulled. The shoe held. The jawbone did not break it or slide off it. The more Vidar pushed, the wider the mouth opened. With a great heave, the silent god tore the wolf's jaws apart. Some tales say he thrust his hand up into the beast's heart and ripped it out. Others say it was the pressure of his grip that broke the spine. Either way, Fenrir died beneath him. The jaws that had closed upon Odin now forced into a final and helpless gape. For a moment, there on the plains of Vigrid, the sun stood above the carcass of his father's killer. There was no time for triumph. All around him the battle still raged. On another part of the field, near where the waves from Jormungandr's rise had flooded the edge of the plain, Thor drove his chariot toward the sea. The thunder god had faced the world serpent once before, in the story of the fishing trip with the giant Hymir. Then he had baited a hook with an ox head, cast it into the roaring water, and felt the enormous weight of Jormungandr on the line. He had heaved the serpent up until its head rose from the waves, poison dripping, clouds gathering. Thor had reached for his hammer then, and the giant had cut the line in fear, letting the serpent sink again into the deep. That first meeting had ended in frustration. This one would not. Thor stepped from his chariot and waded forward, Mjolnir in his fist. Water foamed around his legs. Some verses say that he strode out so far that the waves reached his waist. Others say that the sea itself shrank back from him. Thunder rolled above, though no natural clouds remained in the sky. Jormungandr rose to meet him, vast body coiling, head looming over the shallows. The serpent opened his mouth and spat poison. It blasted across the field in a thick green haze, hissing where it touched armor and skin. Warriors on both sides fell, choking where they stood. Thor lowered his head and walked into it. The venom burned his skin and lungs, but he kept going, each step a deliberate act of will. Mjolnir felt heavy in his hand, but when he raised it, the hammer still moved, as if it preferred to fight rather than rest. With a shout that cut across the rattle of the battle, Thor hurled the hammer. It flew through the poisoned air and struck Jormungandr squarely. The impact shook the plain. Lightning lanced outward from the point of contact. The serpent's skull cracked. Its coils thrashed, smashing ships, crushing giants and men alike. For a long, breathless moment, it seemed as if both combatants hung poised between life and death. Then Jormungandr fell. The great body crashed down, its tail beating the water in final spasms that raised waves higher than any storm had ever done. Poison continued to seep from its jaws and scales, spreading over the field. Thor staggered back. He called Mjolnir to his hand, and it came, but more slowly than usual, as if distance had grown longer in this last age. He took 9 steps away from the fallen serpent. On the 9th he stopped. The venom that had seeped into his body took him then. His legs failed. The hammer slipped from his fingers. Thor, protector of Midgard, god of thunder and storms, fell dead on the field he had saved from the coils of the world serpent. Elsewhere, Tyr met Garm, the god of law and binding oaths, who had given his hand long ago to the jaws of Fenrir, now faced another hound whose chest was stained with blood. There is less song about this meeting, but the old texts are clear on its result. Tyr and Garm fell upon one another and tore at flesh and armor both, and neither walked away. The god who had accepted pain to keep a promise died in a struggle that no law could prevent. Freyr rode forward on his shining boar Golinbursti, the creature's golden bristles casting light in the gloom. He carried in his hand not the legendary sword whose loss he would now regret, but a lesser weapon. In some tellings, an antler torn from a great stag. He faced Surt, who strode at the head of the fire giants like a walking brand. Surt's sword blazed more brightly than anything else on the field. Its light cut through the darkness, reflected in the eyes of men and beasts, drew shadows out long and thin. He swung it once, twice, and whole ranks of warriors went down. When he and Freyr met, it was like the meeting of summer and a forest fire. Freyr was strong and swift, and he had the favor of fertile fields and calm seas behind him. He fought well. Old lines hint that he might have had a chance had he still held the sword that once moved of its own will. But bargains made in youth cannot be unmade on the last day. Surt's blade found him. The god of prosperity and peace fell before the Lord of Fire. In that moment, the last hope of holding back the final burning died. Heimdall and Loki also found each other in the chaos. The watchman of the gods, whose hearing was keen enough to catch the grow of grass and whose sight was sharp enough to see far into the distance, faced the trickster who had once moved freely under his nose. Their story had always been one of warning and intrusion, horn and hidden footstep. Now there was no secrecy. They fought openly, and neither yielded. In the end, the sources say, each dealt the other a mortal blow. Heimdall fell with the knowledge that he had done his duty to the last. Loki fell with the taste of his own bitterness on his tongue, the ruin he had helped cause finally taking him as it took the others. All across Vigrid such meetings unfolded. Gods whose names have faded from our memory found their foes and died. Giants who had brooded in caves for ages at last spent their stored-up anger. The Einherjar fought as they had practiced in Valhalla. But this time, their wounds did not close at dusk. Spears pierced, blades cut, flesh tore, blood soaked the ground until the plain that had seemed bare at dawn was a red and trampled field by whatever light still remained. Through it all, the World Tree shook. Yggdrasil groaned as if each branch bore a new and terrible weight. In its roots the dragon gnawed with renewed fury. The Norns watched from their well, their work of watering and tending now a gesture of respect rather than a real hope of preservation. Above them, the bridge that had once linked Asgard to the lower worlds lay in shards, its bright colors scattered like fallen leaves. Then Surt lifted his sword high. He had killed and burned enough flesh. Now his roll widened. The blade that had shone brighter than any sun rose against a sky that held no lights at all. When he brought it down, it was not upon a single foe. It was into the world itself. Flame leapt where the point struck. It ran along the ground like oil fire, but there was no water that could quench it. The blaze climbed trees and licked at mountains. It flashed along the branches of Yggdrasil and curled around the trunks of the forests of Midgard. It leapt to the shattered pieces of Bifrost and turned their prismatic fragments into sparks. Fire spread into the halls of gods and men alike. Roof beams that had held feasts and judgments for centuries went up in moments. The longhouse and the palace burned together. Heat rolled out in waves that turned air into a shimmering curtain. Under that fire, the very earth seemed to shift. Mountains sagged and sank. The seas boiled where the flames touched them. The land buckled. The old poems say that the earth would sink into the sea, that waves would close over it, and that only ash and steam would remain for a while where so much life and story had once been. For a time there was only fire and water and the sound of things breaking. Surt's sword had done its work. The flames that leapt from its edge spread over fields and mountains and the very branches of the World Tree. Seas rose boiling to meet them. The plain of Vigrid sank beneath waves that hissed and steamed. Halls of gods and halls of men alike collapsed into smoke and foam. Then, even the roaring quieted. What remained was a wide stillness, heavy and deep, as if the world had been dropped into a dark pool and all movement had gone down with it. Long moments passed that were not counted in days or years. The sky, if there was a sky, had no lights. Out of that stillness something moved. From the water a new earth rose, green and fresh. This is how the old poems say it. The land comes up again from the sea, not as a charred ruin, but as a place washed clean. Valleys open where there had been plains. New mountains lift their shoulders through mist. Grass spreads over slopes that have never known footprints. Streams run clear along paths they carve for the first time. Above this new land a light appears. The sun that Fenrir devoured is gone, but she had a daughter before the end, young and bright. Now that daughter takes her mother's place in the sky. She moves in a course that feels both familiar and new, shining on leaves that glisten with fresh water, on hills with no graves, on shores without ships. In that light, some familiar figures walk. The gods are not all gone. Vidar, who tore the jaws of Fenrir, and Vali, who avenged Balder, come together on the new plane. The sons of Thor appear as well, Modi and Magni, and with them they carry Mjolnir, which has survived the fire and flood. In time, Balder himself steps forth from the realm of Hel, and with him comes Hodra, no longer cursed by the blind throw that Loki guided. The two brothers are reconciled in this brighter age. They find a place called Idavol again, a field where Asgard once stood. There they build new halls. One of these is Gimle, fairer than any structure the gods had known before, with a roof of gold that will never tarnish. Another hall, filled with music and plenty, waits for the good among men. As they walk this renewed world, the gods look out over empty meadows and young woods. Somewhere in the shelter of the world tree, two human figures stir. They are called Lif and Lifthrasir, life and lover of life. They had hidden within the wood through the fire and the freezing, feeding on dew and leaves, while death raged above them. Now they step out into the new dawn. From them the future race of men will come. The old sources do not agree on every detail of this rebirth. Some of the hope here carries the scent of later Christian thought, written down by men who knew of resurrection and a golden age to come. Yet even if such hands helped shape the end of the tale, there is also something deeply Norse in it. A world that began in violence does not finish only in ruin. After fire and flood, grass still dares to grow.